Today is the day the Lord has made, and these are the times through which God has decided we shall live. And when I say that, God has decided we shall live, that implies something. Well, it doesn't imply it, it states it. He chose when you'd be born for this very moment, meaning that you are meant to exist at this very time, even as bizarre a time as it is, and it is utterly bizarre. We have President Trump, who's asked for, and I would say, I hope, demands, to have some extra military aircraft and vehicles, because apparently this threat from Iran is real, even though it's our intelligence services who are saying it. It actually appears to be actually real, that they want to kill him. Now, that's interesting. It's horrifying, and it's to be expected. But the domestic enemies, that's something that none of us should expect. It's something that none of us should want, obviously. It should stun us. But somehow it doesn't. And President Trump spoke in Waco, Texas, and he made his statement about the rule of law, and he made this statement about internal enemies. And he named some politicians, and we'll go through the politicians he named. But I want to take this and compare it to a guy named Ta-Nehisi Coates. You've heard about him. He's been in the news lately. He's a longtime activist, author, very hard left, really appears to hate Israel and maybe Jewish people. He come out and said recently that he's not certain that he's mentally strong enough to say no to doing something to children and women and innocent people. And I'll play that for you. But I want to talk about how, Iran and their operatives would view a guy like Ta-Nehisi Coates. How would they see him? How would they see lax rule of law? How would they see internal enemies to the United States? And what does that mean for us? And by us, I mean all of us, but in particular, people who would actually like to have our country back, meaning functioning with the Bill of Rights intact. A Bill of Rights that I think, and I contend, you can show started in the book of Genesis. That's a weird idea, isn't it? In the book of Genesis. See, in the book of Genesis, you read about God starting things with freedom. It's often said that God started things with restraint, things you can't do. Not true. The first statement was eat from any of the trees in the garden. Just not that one. So go out throughout the garden, eat what you choose. Just not that one. Because, of course, God knew what that tree would do to us. He wanted us to nourish our bodies. At that time, we didn't get ill. We didn't have illness. We didn't have weakness. That was before the fall. We have that now. And we still can use the common blessings of God to help us avoid illness or to be more healthy. I use a product called Masszymes. It took 243 experiments by my friends Matt and Wade at Bioptimizers to get Masszymes to the point where they would release it. Only in the past few months have they allowed me to speak with you about it. It is proven in a test at Birch International University in Bosnia to show that it creates more amino acids in people's bodies who take it than people who don't. How much more? 1,200%. An elementary understanding of how muscle works and protein works, you would know that amino acids are the building blocks of protein, which are the building blocks of muscle. So you can do this now. Go to bioptimizers.com/Todd. You get 10% off a bottle or a case of Masszymes and all their products. So stop letting poor digestion stop you from reaching your full potential. It's bioptimizers.com/Todd and 10% off Masszymes. This is President Trump speaking at this Waco rally.
The rule of law is a tremendous threat to Western civilization. And I was asked the other day, and I took a little heat for it. They said, who's our biggest threat? Is it China, sir? Is it Russia? I said, no, our biggest threat are high-level politicians that work in the United States government, like Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, Schumer, Biden, Justice Department, because that's poisoning our country. I can do things with China. I made the greatest trade deal in history with China. I don't even talk about it because sometime after that, fairly shortly, What happened with COVID, it was like I didn't want to talk about a trade deal.
Oh my gosh. Sometimes I love that President Trump, he makes these points and then it's just the Trumpism has to come out, man. I did the greatest trade deal in history. So why are domestic enemies so much worse? Well, because, of course, they have access to the levers of power. Does China? If you map what China does in their country versus what's done here, it's utterly fascinating. Open borders. No, they don't play that there. Division. No, not so much. They don't do that. In fact, if you question the government there, you get in mighty big trouble. You do here too, but not to the same extent. Oh, gender politics. Nope. Not a thing. It's not a thing there. DEI. And yet when, of all sources, the New York Times looked at what a Chinese billionaire who lives here was funding, it was all of those things in our country. So do they have access to the levers of power? It appears that they do. We should be shocked. It should have made huge news when I had a retired lieutenant general on my program who said, oh yeah, China has access to the Pentagon. That probably should have been a big deal, but somehow it's not. When an author who continues to get his books published continues to be what the left would say platformed, and I'm not saying he shouldn't be able to go on TV shows or podcasts, he should, to express his opinion, but with an author like Ta-Nehisi Coates is asked about the October 7 attacks in Israel, and he comes along and says, man, I don't know if I'd be strong enough to not women and cut the heads off of children. I feel like that should be a bigger story.
Well, 20 years old, born into Gaza, which is a giant open-air jail. And what I mean by that is if my father is a fisherman and he goes too far out into the sea, he might get shot by somebody off of, the side of Israeli boats. If my mother picks the olive trees and she gets too close to the wall, she might be shot. If my little sister has, cancer and she needs treatment because there are no, facilities to do that in Gaza and I don't get the right permits, she might die. And I grow up under that oppression and that poverty and the wall comes down. Am I also strong enough or even constructed in such a way where I say, this is too far? I don't know that I am. I don't know that I am.
Now, on one hand, he's honest. And I think we should reward honesty with thank you for being honest. On another, he's not honest. Gaza is not the invention of Israel. It is a co-invention. You'll never see fences and borders like you'll see from the Arab countries keeping the people they choose to call Palestinians out. You'd never see border patrols like that. It's a co-invention at the most. And yet there are people in Gaza who don't do that. There are people who do not seek that outcome, who are strong enough to say, no, I won't do that. Perhaps the other question to Mr. Coates is this. Why do the Arab countries participate in the continuing marginalization of the Palestinian people? Why do they continue to make them a separate people? Why don't they assimilate them and bring them into, say, Jordan? Why is that? Is it because societies need buffers? Particularly tyrannical societies need an enemy. It appears that many countries like Iran need the enemy of Israel. It's the anyone but Trump phenomena here. We need an enemy. Let's return to this metaphor of the Garden of Eden for a minute. When the Lord walked with us and we walked with him, and he started things with freedom, eat from all the plants, just not that one. What's the characteristic of the entity that came along as the original thief, murderer, and liar? What's Satan like? Well, he too walked with God. If you want to consider being in heaven walking, he too communed with God. And then God created us, human beings, with bodies. And God created us in his image. And what was Satan's response? Well, the creator of the universe, who is truth, who is light, who is justice, who is love, who is all those things, has seen fit to create this new species of being in his image. Many of the angels looked and said, praise God, look what he's done. How can we help? How can we help this humanity? Satan looked at that and said, I'm more beautiful. I will not serve. Non serviam, I won't serve. And so he chose. Even in heaven, there was freedom of choice. And he became an original enemy. And what was the approach? Jealousy and confusion. To pick an enemy. And what was the original enemy? You know what it was? Safety. The original enemy was the safety of walking with the Creator. The safety and security of knowing you're being told to do things that will be only good for you. What is the enemy of people who seek to destroy our country? A Bill of Rights and a Constitution that, when applied, place proper limits on what government can do. Why are they proper? Because God created us with life. He created us with liberty. He created us with the ability to pursue happiness. He created us with free speech and with accountability for the speech we choose and accountability for the actions we choose to pursue with our bodies and our minds. It's the same enemy. The enemy is the freedom that God gave us that simply cannot be stood by countries like Iran or people like the left.